It was supposed to be a normal Christmas. One of those warm, predictable family evenings full of good food and forced laughter. Kayla's family had a tradition of going all out. Mismatched ornaments from her childhood. Sugar cookies her mother insisted on baking from scratch. A playlist of jazz covers that never changed. Everything in that house was always the same, like they were preserving a picture-perfect holiday in amber. Every year I could count on it. The same faces. The same cranberry sauce no one actually ate. The same passive-aggressive board games after dessert. But this year, something felt different. It started with Kayla's mood. She was too cheerful, too curated. Even before dinner, she was floating around the house like a hostess on a cooking show, plating hors d'oeuvres, refilling drinks, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Her smile was a little too wide. Her hand lingered a little too long on the wine glass. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly. I just knew something was off. I sat at the dining table next to her father, watching Kayla across the room as she topped off her mom's Pinot. The glass was nearly full already. "Careful, Han," I said casually. "You're about to drown the cranberry glazed ham." She laughed, brushing me off like I was the one being too uptight. Her mom was already tipsy by the time the turkey hit the table. Her dad kept telling the same joke about how Kayla was born early because she didn't want to miss Christmas dinner. Everyone played their part, like clockwork. Even me. For most of dinner I said nothing, just nodded when appropriate, passed the potatoes, poured water, faked a few smiles. Inside I was somewhere else, drifting, replaying things I hadn't wanted to think about. 2 months. That's how long it had been since we'd last been int asterisk mate. And even then it had been distant, like she was doing it out of obligation. The Kayla I married used to pull me into bed with a grin. But lately, she'd barely touched me. Always tired, always preoccupied, always one excuse or another. When she finally stood up, glass in hand, cheeks flushed from the wine and attention, I already knew something was coming. I just didn't expect her to say it out loud. "I have a little announcement," she said, raising her glass. That smile plastered across her face like it was glued on. I wasn't sure when the right time was, but I figured, what better than Christmas? She paused for effect. Everyone leaned in. "I'm pregnant." Gasps echoed around the table. Her mother made a noise I can only describe as a squeal sob. Her sister jumped up and hugged her so hard the wine nearly spilled. Her father's jaw dropped into a proud, dopey grin. For a moment, the whole room was buzzing. Voices overlapping, people clapping, someone standing to take a photo. It was pure chaos. And I just sat there, frozen. My fork slipped from my hand and clinked against the plate. Pregnant. She was pregnant. Kayla and I hadn't had S*X since the beginning of October. Not once. And even before that we'd been off. Distant. Cold even. My mind tried to calculate. Tried to rewind the calendar. Tried to find a loophole. Maybe I forgot something. Maybe I misremembered. But no. I was certain. So I stood up. Slowly. Calmly. My napkin slid to the floor. I looked right at her. Not smiling. Not blinking. And I said, loud enough to cut through the noise, "Who's the father?" The room fell dead silent. Kayla's sister's arms froze mid-hug. Her mother's jaw hung open. Her dad set down his glass, eyes narrowing. Everyone stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Kayla didn't miss a beat. She actually chuckled. That same practiced laugh she used when she was trying to play things off in public. "Oh my God," she said, eyes wide in mock horror. "Seriously?" She turned to the group with a laugh, holding up a hand like a sitcom character breaking the fourth wall. "He's joking, obviously. Bad timing, babe." She turned back to me, her eyes locking with mine, and I swear, just for a split second, her smile twitched. Just for a moment, there was a flicker of something underneath. Not fear, not shame, composure. Then, without skipping another beat, she stepped in front of the moment like a shield. "I'm so sorry, everyone," she said. "He's been a little off. Ever since the layoff, you know? It's been a rough few months for both of us. Stress does weird things. Right, honey?" She looked at me, waiting for me to play along. I didn't. She kept smiling. She put a hand on my arm and said, low enough for just me to hear, "Please don't do this right now." I looked down at her hand like it didn't belong on me, like it was something foreign. Then I stepped back. Not out of rage. Not to cause a scene. Just to breathe. Everyone started murmuring again, the way people do when they're unsure if they just witnessed something real or just an awkward joke. Her mom was already laughing nervously, raising her glass again. Her sister was talking over the tension, loudly suggesting names. "If it's a girl, we're going with Olivia, right? Right?" The chaos resumed, like it had never been interrupted. But I stood there, locked in place, my mind running wild. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't even shocked. I was confirming something I had already started to suspect. Because deep down, I knew. This wasn't nerves. This wasn't a bad joke. This was a performance. And she was performing it for everyone except me. I sat down, slowly, hands clasped tight under the table to stop the shaking. I didn't look at her. Couldn't. I just listened to the conversation as it picked up again, as if my question had been nothing more than an awkward joke, an unfortunate blip in an otherwise joyful evening. "Do you think it's a boy? When did you find out? Have you had your first ultrasound? How far along are you?" Her answers came easily, smoothly, as if she'd rehearsed them. "Oh, just about 10 weeks. 10 weeks. 10 weeks ago, she was already avoiding me. 10 weeks ago, she was already choosing someone else." I glanced down at my plate, the food now cold and untouched. Kayla was holding court at the table like a queen in her element, graceful, smiling, bathed in warmth and attention. She looked like a woman who had everything she wanted. And I was no longer part of that picture. Looking back now, I can see every single sign, laid out like blinking neon arrows pointing toward the truth. The problem wasn't that they were hidden. It was that I didn't want to see them. Or maybe I saw them too clearly, and just chose not to believe what they were telling me. That's the thing about betrayal. It's not just the moment you catch them in a lie. It's the months, sometimes years, that led up to it. It's the excuses you accepted, the red flags you rationalized, the gut instincts you buried because admitting the truth would mean shattering your entire reality. For me, it started slowly, quietly. At first, it felt like life was just getting in the way. I had been working long hours at the time, grinding through the final quarter of a failing startup job that was circling the drain. Kayla was picking up more design contracts at her firm, which I was proud of. Really, she'd always been ambitious, and I admired that about her. But her schedule started shifting. Suddenly, she was staying late more often, meetings after hours, networking events that never showed up on her calendar. I'd ask if she wanted me to pick her up after work, and she'd wave me off with a kiss on the cheek and a breezy, "No need, I'll grab a ride." She used to text me throughout the day. Random things, memes, photos of our dog doing something ridiculous, questions about what we should make for dinner. But one day those texts just stopped. No explanation, just silence. If I texted her, sometimes she'd answer, sometimes she wouldn't. And when I asked her about it, she'd say, "I've just been slammed lately, babe. You know how it is." And I did. I knew how it was to be tired, to feel stretched thin, to be burnt out. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Again and again. Even when her wardrobe suddenly changed. It was gradual but noticeable. One morning she left the house wearing a fitted navy blouse and heels I'd never seen before. When I commented on them, she said her boss had encouraged the team to elevate their client-facing look. Fair enough. But it didn't stop there. Suddenly, there were boxes arriving at the door, Zara, Reformation, occasionally even Nordstrom. She'd say it was for work. I need to look sharp for presentations. Sure, I bought that. I wanted to, until I noticed that some of the clothes were more, let's say, curated. Tops that dipped lower than usual. Dresses that hugged her tighter. A red one, in particular, that she hung at the far end of the closet like a trophy. She said she hadn't worn it yet. I remember the way she said it, almost like a dare. She started wearing perfume again, too. Not the one I bought her for our anniversary. Something different. I asked her about it once and she said, "Oh, that old thing? I found it in the back of the drawer." But it was new. I could smell it before she walked into a room. She also signed up for a yoga studio across town, even though we had 3 within walking distance. I offered to go with her, try a class, make it a couple thing. She gave me that look. The one that said, "Please don't make this about you." "It's my time," she said, tying her hair up. "Just something for me." What was I supposed to say to that? I'd always encouraged her to have her own space, her own routine. But this didn't feel like space. Felt like a divide. Like she was building a life that didn't include me in it. I blamed myself at first. Told myself I was overthinking things. I had been laid off after all. My confidence had taken a hit. Maybe I was just projecting my anxiety onto her. Maybe she was pulling away, but only because I was acting distant, lost in my own failure. It was easier to believe that than to face the alternative. Then came our anniversary. 6 years married. I'd made a reservation at this little Italian place in Midtown where we'd gone on one of our first dates. I booked it 2 weeks in advance, arranged for her favorite dessert to be brought out after the meal, even found the receipt from that first night so I could recreate what we ordered. She forgot. She walked through the door that night at almost 10 p.m., still wearing her work clothes, smelling like perfume and exhaustion. When I asked her if she remembered what day it was, her face dropped. "Oh my God," she breathed. "I'm so sorry. I've been so caught up at the studio." I had the table set, candles lit, her gift, an old camera lens she'd been wanting for months. Wrapped and waiting, she saw it all, took it in, gave me a soft, guilty smile, then said, "Can we maybe celebrate this weekend? I think Melissa's going through a breakdown and she asked me to come over tonight." Melissa was one of her co-workers. Friendly enough. A little chaotic. I nodded slowly. "Sure," I said. "Of course." She changed clothes upstairs. I sat at the table watching the candles burn down. She left within 20 minutes. Even then, I told myself it was fine. That I was being sensitive. That people forget things, even important things. And that Kayla wouldn't lie to me. I wanted to believe her so badly. I ignored the part of me that was starting to feel like a stranger in my own house. I tried harder after that. Made breakfast more often. Cleaned up without being asked. Sent little check-in messages during the day. She'd reply with emojis. Nothing more. We used to lie in bed and talk about anything, travel, the next stage of our lives, what kind of house we'd want when we had kids. Now, she'd scroll on her phone with her back turned. Or say she was too tired to talk. When I asked her how she was really doing, just once, she said I was being dramatic. "Why do you always assume something's wrong?" she snapped. I wanted to say, "Because you feel 1,000 miles away." But instead I said, "You're right. I'm just tired." And that became the answer to everything. When she came home later and later, I told myself, she's tired. When she stopped laughing at my jokes, I thought we're both just exhausted. When her phone went from being left on the kitchen counter to being glued to her hand, even in the shower, I told myself that's just how people are these days. When she stopped touching me, no more spontaneous hugs, no stolen kisses in the hallway, no fingers grazing mine as we passed each other. I told myself, we're in a lull. Every couple has them. But the truth was I wasn't in a lull. I was in the process of being erased, bit by bit, without shouting, without slamming doors, just absence. Absence of attention, absence of affection, absence of the woman I'd built my life around. And still I held on. I told myself it would pass, that we'd reconnect after the holidays, that once I got a new job and the pressure lifted, things would go back to the way they were. I didn't realize that I was holding on to a version of her that no longer existed. Or maybe, one that never really did. The day after Christmas was quiet in the way only December 26th can be. Boxes stacked by the trash, cookie tins half empty on the counter, and that strange stillness after the holiday buzz finally fades. Kayla had gone to meet her sister for coffee or a post-Christmas walk, or maybe both. I barely listened anymore when she announced her plans like I wasn't even part of them. I stayed home, trying to find a distraction in the hum of the TV and the smell of leftover ham warming in the oven. I sat on the couch flipping through channels I didn't care about, just looking for noise. Something bright. Something to drown out the thoughts. Our smart TV had been acting up lately, and while I tried to connect it to the Bluetooth speaker, it pinged a prompt I hadn't expected. Sync with available cloud accounts? Kayla's email popped up automatically. I stared at it. She'd used the TV to show her design portfolios before, mood boards, client slides, studio presentations, so her account was still cached. It wasn't unusual. Just convenient. I clicked yes. The photos loaded slowly at first, thumbnails appearing in neat little rows, most of them from her studio. Samples of paint swatches, desk setups, fabric draped across workbenches. The kind of pictures she usually showed me casually, if at all. But then I saw one that didn't fit. It was taken in a dimly lit restaurant I didn't recognize. Mood lighting, a table in the background with a bottle of red wine and a flickering candle. And right in the center of the photo was Kayla, wearing that blue dress, the one I never saw her leave in, the one I didn't even know she owned. She was sitting, not just sitting, on the lap of a man, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist, her head tilted into his neck, eyes closed, a soft smile on her lips like she belonged there. The kind of photo that isn't posed because it doesn't need to be. The kind you take when you're not afraid to be seen. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like my body couldn't catch up. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I stared at the man's face, willing myself to be wrong. Maybe it was someone she knew casually. Maybe this was older than it looked. Maybe it was a prank, a misunderstanding, a sick joke. But it wasn't. I knew who he was. I'd seen him before. Twice, actually. Once on her Instagram stories from a few months ago, smiling with her design team at a launch party. She had tagged him. Our newest team member, Eric. The second time was in person. Briefly, in passing. He dropped her off after work one day when her car was in the shop. She had introduced him as just a coworker. Harmless, polite. One of those guys who calls you man too many times and laughs a little too hard at his own jokes. That night I'd shaken his hand. And now here he was, holding my wife like she was never anyone else's to begin with. I didn't touch the remote, didn't move a muscle. I just kept staring at that image, every second stripping away another layer of denial. Her hand was on his chest, fingers resting gently against his collar. Her smile was small, almost sleepy, the kind of smile you don't fake. The kind that says, I'm safe here. I've been here before. It didn't feel like betrayal. Not immediately. Felt like erasure. Like I was seeing a version of her that had been edited out of my life completely. I didn't know what hurt more, the physical closeness or the expression on her face. Not shock. Not guilt. Just peace. Like this was her real life and I was the one intruding. I sat there for what must have been an hour, barely blinking, scrolling through the rest of the synced photos. There weren't many. Whoever had taken the picture had done it discreetly. Maybe she sent it to herself. Maybe he did. Either way, it was enough. Enough to confirm that what I had been feeling, this cold, creeping certainty that I was living beside a stranger, wasn't just paranoia. It was real. She was gone. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever word you want to use. The woman who used to fall asleep with her head on my chest was now cradling someone else's shoulder like it was the only home she'd ever known. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my trance. I barely managed to close the TV's photo app before she walked in, smiling like nothing had happened, shaking snow out of her scarf, complaining about how crowded the coffee shop was. Hey babe, she said, dropping her keys on the table. I swear they put crack in their peppermint mocha this year. It's all anyone was ordering. She paused, looking at me. I must have looked pale. You okay? I forced a nod. Yeah, just tired. She walked past me into the kitchen, humming to herself. I stared at her back as she reached into the fridge. The same back I'd rubbed during her migraines. The same voice I used to listen to half asleep while she told me her dreams. It all felt distant now, like I was watching someone act out a version of Kayla I used to know. And I realized, right then, that I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Not like this. Not without a plan. Because something inside me had cracked. But it hadn't shattered. Not all the way. And I didn't want to hand her the chance to lie, to gaslight me, to turn this around with tears and words like mistake or complicated. She was good at that, better than I'd ever realized. So I stayed quiet, let her make dinner, let her talk about her sister's new boyfriend, let her slide into bed next to me like everything was okay. And as she drifted off, I stared at the ceiling. The image of that photo burned into my brain like it had been seared there. That blue dress, that man, that look on her face. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need to hack her phone or follow her or check receipts or search her bag. I had already seen everything I needed to see. And somehow that made it worse. Because now I couldn't lie to myself anymore. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't a phase. This was the truth, staring at me from a glowing screen like it had been waiting patiently for me to catch up. And now that I couldn't go back. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't pace the room or punch a wall or grab her phone while she slept and start scrolling through messages. I didn't ask her to sit down for a serious talk. I didn't even let her know I'd seen the photo. Instead, I got up early the next morning, before the sun, before her alarm, and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and my laptop. The house was silent, still wrapped in that eerie post-holiday fog. Outside, the ground was glazed with frost. Inside, I began disappearing. Not physically, not yet, but in all the ways that mattered. First, I opened the shared calendar, the one we'd been using since we got married. I deleted my name from the recurring events, weekly grocery runs, vet appointments, Saturday brunch with her sister, the yoga class I once offered to join. I didn't touch her events. I wanted her to see mine vanish. Then I logged into our Amazon account and removed my name from the shipping profile. Unsubscribed from the couple's meal box we barely used anymore. Removed my payment method. Left hers. I turned off the shared reminders on our phones. I disabled my access to the collaborative note where we kept lists, house projects, weekend plans, books to read together. Gone. Just like that. I backed up my documents from the cloud folder we once used to organize our lives. Taxes. Travel itineraries, mortgage paperwork. I didn't delete them. I copied them to a private drive and left the rest untouched. That night, I opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it simply January. Inside, I created 3 subfolders: photos, evidence, legal. I didn't fill them yet, but I knew I would. In the following days, I started watching her the way you study something foreign. A creature you once knew but no longer recognize. Kayla had always been good at routine. Makeup done a certain way, favorite coat always hung by the door, coffee made exactly at 6:40 every morning. But now I watched for the breaks in the pattern. The tiny shifts, the little lies she didn't even realize she was telling anymore. I noticed that she kept her phone on Do Not Disturb during dinner now. That she changed her lock screen from a picture of us to an abstract design. That her text tones were silent, but her fingers still danced over the screen with a kind of muscle memory. Thoughtless, casual, constant. She mentioned Eric exactly once. Casually. Offhand. Oh, Eric says the new client might extend their contract. Big win for us. I said nothing, just nodded. I wasn't collecting proof to argue. I was collecting clarity. And maybe freedom. There's something surreal about watching someone lie to you while they're smiling, while they're making dinner, while they're planning a weekend trip like they didn't already erase you in their head weeks ago. One night, she stood in the doorway of our bedroom, holding a sweater up to her body. "You like this color on me?" she asked. It was rust orange. Tight. New. I said, "It's not really your style." She shrugged, pulling it over her head. "Maybe I'm trying something different." Different. Yeah. She was always trying something different lately. That week, I also started reviewing some of the old paperwork I'd kept stashed away. Things we'd signed years ago when we were buying the house, consolidating our accounts, updating our insurance. It was incredible how much trust we had put into each other back then. Or maybe just how much I had put into her. Most of the documents were straightforward, but one stood out. It was an old employment agreement I had written for a side business I'd started years ago. one that Kayla had helped with at the time. Just a passion project that never really went anywhere, but we had formal paperwork for it, including a basic operating agreement. I remembered that we'd added a clause about ethical conduct, mainly to cover NDA-type boundaries. It was laughable now how official we had made something that barely turned a profit. But I had kept the files. I had printed copies. And most importantly, she had signed it. It wouldn't hold up in court, not in the way people imagine. But it was still documentation. A small crack in the wall she didn't know existed. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't looking to blow things up. I was auditing a life. I started listing our subscriptions, our shared assets, even our furniture. Quietly building an inventory, not out of spite, but because I needed to understand what was mine and what had simply been lent to me under the illusion of permanence. I started moving cash into a personal checking account. Not large sums, just enough to separate gas and groceries, utilities and takeout. Enough that, if things suddenly shifted, I'd already be standing on solid ground. Each change was tiny, almost invisible, but it felt like air returning to my lungs. She didn't notice, not at first. She was too busy performing. One night, I asked if she wanted to watch a movie, something we hadn't done together in weeks. She said, "I have a migraine," then went upstairs and spent 2 hours scrolling TikTok in bed. I listened to the muffled audio from the hallway, heard her laugh. Migraine, right? I didn't say a word, just made a note in the file labeled January. And still, I didn't confront her. There's a kind of power in silence. In knowing more than the other person thinks you do. In letting them believe they're in control while you quietly take it back. Because that's what I had lost, more than anything. Control. For the past few months, I had let myself be pulled along like debris in someone else's flood. I had waited for her moods to shift, waited for her schedule, waited for her to remember the version of me she used to love. But I was done waiting. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to leave slowly enough that when she finally looked up, I'd already be gone. It's funny what kind of memories resurface when your world starts to come apart. The moment I decided I was going to leave Kayla didn't actually happen the day after I saw the photo. Or the night she came home late with that wine-stained smile. It didn't happen when she forgot our anniversary or rolled over in bed when I tried to reach for her. No, the moment I decided I was going to walk away had happened years earlier. Back in 2020, we had just come off one of the worst fights of our marriage. The kind that didn't even have a clear beginning. Just a buildup of frustration, exhaustion, little things neither of us addressed until the pressure finally cracked the seal. I don't even remember the trigger. Something about the way I'd folded the laundry or that I hadn't answered a text fast enough. I just remember the yelling. Her voice sharp, mine louder, things thrown, doors slammed. Afterward, she left the house for 2 days to clear her head. She stayed with her sister. At least that's what she said. I didn't follow. I didn't text. I spent those 2 days sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, wondering how two people who used to slow dance in the kitchen at midnight could become so alien to each other. That weekend, when she came back, she acted like nothing happened. "I'm over it if you are," she said, setting her keys on the table. And that's when it clicked. Not just that she could walk away that easily, but that I needed to be prepared if she ever did it for real. So I opened a separate account the next morning. Just for emergencies. Just in case. At the time, it felt silly, paranoid, even. I wasn't planning to leave her. I wasn't even planning for divorce. I just needed a fallback. Failsafe. Something that belonged to me alone. I kept it small. A little from each paycheck. A quiet stream of deposits I never talked about. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, but didn't ask. That was the first step. The second came later that year when I read about domestic asset protection trusts. Those obscure legal tools rich families use to hide money during lawsuits. It sounded like something from a crime drama, but I was curious. So I researched, read articles, talked to a friend of mine from college who had become a financial planner. "Is this legal?" I'd asked him. "Very," he said, "if you structure it right, especially if it's for your kid." We didn't have children then, still don't, but I'd always imagined we would. I even floated the idea with Kayla once, setting aside something long-term, something future-proof. She waved it off. "Let's focus on today, not 10 years from now," she said, brushing it away like dust on a table. But I didn't forget it. A few months later, I set up the paperwork. It was quiet, boring even. I met with a lawyer on my lunch breaks, transferred small portions of money from my freelance work, income that never touched our joint account. I created the shell of a fund, set to activate in case of certain conditions. Divorce, infidelity, medical emergencies. All legal, all notarized. It wasn't a trap. It was a parachute. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friend. It wasn't about secrets. It was about protection, about not being caught off guard again, about not sitting on the edge of a bed, staring at the wall, wondering if I was about to lose everything while the other person moved on without hesitation. At the time, I told myself I'd never need to use it, but by the time I saw that photo of Kayla in the blue dress, curled into someone else's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world, I knew exactly where to go. I opened the folder labeled Legal, uploaded everything I had, copies of the trust documents, scanned receipts, even the dated file logs that proved when each asset had been separated. I called the same lawyer. She remembered me. "It's been a while," she said. "What can I do for you?" "I'm ready," I said. She didn't ask for details, just gave me a list. I followed it. Bank accounts were divided, logins reset, insurance policies updated. She told me not to confront Kayla yet, that timing mattered, that how I handled the next few weeks could impact everything. Legally, financially, emotionally. "Do not tip your hand," she warned. "Not until you're ready to walk away and never look back." I didn't intend to fight Kayla for anything. I wasn't going to play dirty. I just wanted to make sure I walked out whole, with my dignity, with my sanity, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I didn't lose everything to a lie. I compiled timelines, small but important things. Dates she claimed to be at the studio, text messages that didn't line up, Uber charges that skipped across the city to neighborhoods where she had no business being. I didn't obsess. I didn't dig too far. I only needed enough to protect myself. The strange thing was, the more I organized, the calmer I became. I didn't feel heartbroken anymore. I felt focused. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. She was already gone. I was just catching up. There's a kind of power that comes from being prepared, from knowing you've done the work in advance. Most people panic when they're betrayed. They lash out. They scramble. I had done the opposite. I had laid bricks long before the fire started. And now all I had to do was follow the path out. A week later, she came home from another work trip. Same man, different lie. I met her in the hallway,